Hello everyone, and welcome back to The Wave. I'm your host, Coach Andre, and today we're diving into the Utah Jazz and breaking down everything you need to know about their upcoming offseason. We'll cover how their 24-25 season went, review their current roster and contract situations, look at their draft picks and salary cap outlook, and discuss their biggest needs and priorities moving into the next year. Hey, whether you're a Utah Jazz fan or love keeping up with NBA team building, this video will help you get up to speed on what Utah needs and where they stand going into next summer. Let's go ahead and jump right in. The Utah Jazz wrapped up a brutal 17-65 season, which would be their third straight year missing the playoffs and their worst record in franchise history. And while the front office keeps calling this a teardown instead of a rebuild, let's just be honest, it's been 3 years of losing and the so-called foundation is still shaky at best. Yeah, sure, the young guys got some minutes. You had Walker Kessler, Keontae George, and a handful of other prospects who were out there every night. But where's the real progress? Outside of a few flashes from Isaiah Collier and Kyle Filipowski, nobody stepped up as a true franchise cornerstone. Taylor Hendricks missed the whole year, Cody Williams barely played, and the rest of the core is still a giant question mark. You know, at some point, you have to stop collecting assets and start building a team. The Jazz can't keep hoping the next draft pick will fix everything. If the front office wants to get serious, it's time to get aggressive. It's time to start packaging some of these young pieces, start targeting a proven talent, and give the fans something to believe in. Because honestly, right now, this rebuild feels endless and Jazz Nation deserves better. Don't miss out on any NBA offseason action. Hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you're the first to catch every team's breakdown every day, all month long. Join the wave and stay ahead of the game. Heading into the offseason, the Utah Jazz have Lauri Markkanen locked up on a massive extension with the young pieces like Walker Kessler, Keontae George, Taylor Hendricks, Isaiah Collier, Bryce Sensabaugh, and Cody Williams all under contract. But don't let the list fool you. Utah's situation is anything but stable. The real wrench in the rebuild is really John Collins. Right now he holds a $26.5 million player option, and after a solid season, it's almost certain he'll opt in, tying up big money and making Utah's cap sheet even trickier. If he does stick around, he's a prime trade chip, but if the Jazz can't move him, his contract could stall any real progress. Meanwhile, you have both John Collins and Colin Sexton on expiring deals, as well as Jordan Clarkson, whose future is just as cloudy with the organization. All three of these players could be dangled to contenders, but none are guaranteed to bring back any kind of value that Utah desperately needs right now. Then there's the whole Lauri Markkanen question. Now that his trade restrictions are lifted, he's one of the most talked about names on the market. So do the Utah Jazz want to cash in and go all in on the youth movement, or are they trying to build around him and risk spinning this whole Lauri Markkanen wheel for another year or two? Utah's front office is at a crossroad. The Collins decision, Markkanen's future, and what to do with their expiring vets will define whether this rebuild finally moves forward or if it just keeps dragging on and on and on. Now, let's talk about the NBA draft. Utah entered the 2025 NBA draft tied for the best odds at landing the number 1 pick, but instead experienced the worst case scenario that they could ever face. They dropped to the 5th overall selection. Their hopes of drafting a franchise-altering talent like Cooper Flagg just vanished, giving it to teams like Dallas, San Antonio, Philly, or even Charlotte, which is another video in itself. Even though Utah fell to the number 5 pick, we can't deny that Utah does still have a top 5 pick in a deep draft class, along with 4 selections this year, including their own, Minnesota's first rounder, and second round picks from Dallas and the Clippers. Now, Utah's front office kind of faces a tough decision. With the 5th overall pick, they're unlikely to land a superstar like Cooper Flagg, but they can go for other potential stars like VJ Edgecombe. If the right opportunity arises, Utah could package the number 5 pick and other assets to trade up or acquire an established star, accelerating the rebuild. Look, it sucks that Utah missed out on the top 4 pick, which is quite honestly a setback, but Utah still has some great draft capital and flexibility that gives them options going into the offseason. I think the front office just has to stay creative. Like, whatever they're trying to do, take that 5th pick if they want to swing it for a star, or if they want to go out and get some other talent, maybe trade up in the draft. There's some options that Utah has, and the Utah front office has to start making some pivotal decisions on what they want to do. Another thing Utah needs to pay attention to is a salary cap. Utah heads into free agency with their hands tied quite literally by John Collins' $26.5 million player option. The Jazz aren't really in control here. It's up to Collins to decide whether he wants to stick around for another year of rebuilding or test the market for a contender. If he opts in, Utah's cap space could vanish quite literally overnight, leaving them stuck on the sidelines in free agency and forced to wait until those big contracts finally come off the books in 26-27. But here's the thing, if Collins does pick up that option, don't be surprised if Utah immediately starts shopping him. His value is as high as it's been in years. He's coming off a strong season, and as an expiring $26 million contract, he's suddenly a very attractive piece for contenders looking for front court help without long-term salary commitments. The Jazz front office can't afford to just sit back and wait. They need to be proactive, exploring every trade and sign and trade scenario before the window closes and the cap finally clears. Otherwise, they risk wasting another year of development and flexibility, all at the mercy of a decision that isn't even theirs. Look, if Utah wants to avoid being stuck in neutral, they need to make a move before 26-27, not after. The clock is ticking, and right now, John Collins holds the keys, but the Jazz should be ready to pivot to the trade market the moment he opts in. Speaking of the trade market, let's talk 2025 free agency. The 2025 free agency class is about as weak as it gets. Outside of aging stars like LeBron James and James Harden, there's just not much on the market. And let's be real, Utah has never been a premier free agent destination, so even if there were big names available, the Jazz would be facing an uphill battle to sign them. Banking on free agency to fix this roster just isn't realistic. That's why Utah's front office needs to focus on the trade market and the draft, not pipe dreams of landing a superstar in July. The Jazz have assets, picks, and some intriguing players under contract. Their best shot at landing real talent is by swinging a trade for a star or doubling down on player development, not waiting around for free agents who almost never choose Salt Lake City. If Utah wants to accelerate this rebuild, it's time to get aggressive and creative, not passive and hopeful. Now, let's quickly tackle the front office and coaching. The Utah Jazz front office remains steady, with Danny Ainge and Justin Zanuck still leading the rebuild. There haven't been any shakeups or major changes. They're sticking with the same leadership group that's overseen the roster teardown and asset accumulation over the last few years. The most notable recent move is the multi-year extension for head coach Will Hardy, who's now signed through 2031. Hardy is widely respected for his communication and leadership, especially with young players, and the Jazz clearly see him as the right coach to guide this long-term rebuild. Despite a tough record so far, the organization has doubled down on continuity and patience, betting that stability on the sidelines will pay off as the young core develops. Overall, the front office is doing a solid job staying the course. There's no glaring reason for concern, but also nothing especially bold or game-changing coming from the top. For now, it's a wait-and-see approach as the Jazz continue to build for their future. Utah's biggest priorities this offseason are clear. They desperately need to upgrade their wing defense, ball handling, and overall playmaking. The Jazz finished dead last in the NBA in points allowed, turnover percentage, and fast break points given up. A brutal combination that exposed their lack of perimeter size, defensive versatility, and ability to take care of the ball. Even with Walker Kessler anchoring the paint and Lauri Markkanen providing scoring, the team's perimeter defense and guard play were glaring weaknesses all year. If Utah wants to take a real step forward, they have to target bigger, more athletic wings and guards who can defend, create, and help reduce the team's historic turnover issue. The draft is their best shot to address these needs, with prospects like Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, and BJ Edgecombe offering this kind of two-way impact and size the roster is missing. But even beyond the draft, internal development is crucial. Guys like Keontae George, Taylor Hendricks, and Bryce Sensabaugh have to show real growth on both ends if this rebuild is going to gain any traction. Until the Jazz fix their perimeter defense and ball security, they'll keep spinning their wheels. This offseason is all about finding those difference makers, whether that be through the draft, trades, or internal leaps, who can finally help Utah build a real identity on both sides of the ball. Utah's rebuild hinges on their young players making real leaps, and there's no shortage of X factors and wildcards who could change this team's trajectory in a hurry. Walker Kessler is already a defensive force, but if he adds more offense to his game, he could become one of the league's most versatile bigs. Keontae George, despite inconsistent shooting, had flashed the shot creation and playmaking skills to be a difference maker. If he matures and tightens up his shot selection, his ceiling is much higher than those numbers suggest. We also have rookies like Kyle Flipowski and Isaiah Collier showing major growth, especially from beyond the arc. Flipowski's revamped shooting mechanics have turned him into one of the NBA's most promising offensive rookies, while Collier's newfound confidence from deep is unlocking the rest of his game as a passer and slasher. Bryce Sensabaugh and Cody Williams are also in the mix, each with the potential to carve out bigger roles if they take the next step in their development. Realistically speaking, if even a couple of these young players break out, it could accelerate the Utah Jazz's rebuild and give the franchise a much clearer direction. The Jazz are betting on internal growth to turn potential into production, and this next season will reveal who's ready to become the real building block of the team. Look, Utah's rebuild is still in its early stages, and the front office isn't shy about it. They see the past few years as a teardown, not a true rebuild yet. The focus remains on developing young talent, moving expiring contracts for future assets, and being patient with the process. But the real accelerator here is the draft. If the Jazz land a top 3 pick, especially with a generational prospect like Cooper Flagg on the board, they could fast track their timeline and start building a competitive core sooner than expected. On the flip side, if they miss out on a top pick, expect another year of asset collection and development, with the front office likely shopping veterans like John Collins and Jordan Clarkson for picks or expiring deals. And that's a full rundown on where the Utah Jazz stand heading into a pivotal offseason. This team's at a crossroads, loaded with draft picks, young talent, and tough decisions that will shape the next era of Jazz basketball. Whether the front office gets aggressive or keeps playing the waiting game, one thing's clear: the clock is ticking, and Jazz Nation deserves to see real progress. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss any of my daily off-season breakdowns for every NBA team. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What should Utah do next? And who do you think will take the biggest leap? I'm Coach Andre, and you're watching The Wave. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you guys on the next one.